Hello, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. Let's thank Shop House, Chipotle, and Sweet Greens for providing the beautiful and delicious food. Thank you. I have one quick announcement that I think is really cool. Food Tank is trending #1 on Twitter worldwide today. Yesterday we were second. We're just beating out the launch of Windows 10. So before we begin panel 3, and please be patient with my voice. I've been talking a lot. Before we begin panel 3, we're going to show a short video from the Barilla Center for Food and Nutrition Foundation about the need to end food waste.
In order to sensitize people to food waste, I think we need to appeal to people's sense of humanity. We all live in a world where hunger exists on a massive scale. And unfortunately, hunger coexists with waste. The more we think about that massive paradox of waste and hunger, of 1 billion people not having enough to eat while 1/3 of the food is not being used, the more we will take action and remedy that problem.
We produce food, but 1/3 of this food is lost. From the countryside where it is produced, it's lost in the retailers, but it is lost also at home. Everybody can do something to try to reduce this waste of food.
We can start with people in their own home being more conscious of what they're buying and how much, and making sure they use the food that they buy. But we really also have to address the corporations and the farmers all along the supply chain to make sure that food waste doesn't happen because food doesn't look right. Food waste shouldn't happen because refrigeration fails, and there are so many other ways along the supply chain that we need to make sure we're addressing the problem of food waste.
So at Tesco, we recognise that we've got a shared responsibility for food waste right across the value chain from farm to fork. So we want to work in partnership with our producers and our suppliers, and also help our customers to tackle the problem. To help customers, we have recently launched new packaging for some of our produce lines, which includes food waste messaging, hints and tips how customers can reduce food waste.
The people really should know all the impacts in the environment of food waste. That is, for instance, the water footprint of food waste. It's about 215 cubic meter. That is the amount of the Volga River in 1 year.
I think the food waste objective of the Milan Protocol is really very important. As a planet, we waste 1.3 billion tons of food every year, and it's something that we really must tackle. The first thing you find out when you talk to people about food waste is they don't realize they're actually doing it. So one of the key things is to raise awareness of the fact that food is being wasted in the home, it is being wasted in the supply chain at significant levels. If food waste was a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter of carbon on the planet behind the US and China. So this is a priority for us all. If we're going to feed the population going forward, the 9 billion people predicted by 2050, we really need to tackle food waste.
This panel is obviously about the Milan Protocol, but it's also about the need for more international agreements that can really improve the food system. The Milan Protocol calls for an end to a world in which hunger and food waste coexist, where crops feed biofuels and animals instead of people, and where obesity in one country contrasts starvation in another. I'm so excited to introduce our first speaker for this panel. He's my dear friend and colleague, Luca Virginio, the Vice President of the Barilla Center for Food and Nutrition Foundation, and the Chief Communications and External Relations Officer of Barilla Group. He's been really leading the efforts around the Milan Protocol, and again, so excited that he came all the way from Italy to join us today. Our moderator for this panel is someone I've been talking to over the years for a while now. He is Joe DeCapua, the managing editor of Voice of America. Joe has covered stories all over the world and has won numerous awards for his humanitarian reporting. And we're incredibly honored to have him and Luca and all of our panelists here today. I'd like to invite them all out on the stage. Let's give them a round of applause.
So Good afternoon to everybody, and thank you a lot for this invitation to talk about such an important topic, and also to thanks to our moderator and the panelists that will comment on my introductory remarks. What I'm going to propose today and share with you in the next few minutes is really very ambitious. Probably is a dream. Someone already said that it is crazy, but there is only one certainty, that what I'm going to propose is very urgent and important, something that we cannot delay anymore. So our proposal is to have, as soon as possible, a protocol on food and nutrition. A protocol which deals with and gives answers to the big and urgent dilemmas that the planet and the people experience every day. You have to know that the foundation that I represent, the Barilla Foundation, with the contribution of several international experts, in the last years studied and summarized what we call the great food paradoxes of our century. I want to make sure that you know that today, in the 21st century in our planet, with more than 900 million people that they don't have access to food, there are almost twice as many who are overweight or obese. And 36 million people die each year because they don't have access to food, while 30 million people die each year because they have too much food. In other words, in this planet, there are people that die because they have too little, and people that die because they have too much. The second paradox. Today, people, animals, and cars are competing for food. Let me explain better what I mean. While we have the 900 million people malnourished, 33% of the total corn production, 33%, is used to feed almost the 5 billion livestock. And 7% of the total corn production worldwide is used for the production of biofuel. And all of that, while the projection to 2020 showed that the cereals intended for human consumption will decrease, and the cereals intended for animals or for the production of energy will increase. These are public data. And again, another paradox. While we have 36 million people that die every year because they are being denied the right to food, this planet, our planet, produces already enough food to feed at least four times the 900 million people malnourished. Unfortunately, for different reasons, 1/3 of the total food production get wasted. It will never reach our tables. In developing countries, because there are no infrastructure, no logistic. In the so mature economies, your economy, the United States, my economy, Europe, simply because it is lost simply for our bad behaviors. Because we don't eat everything we buy. For example, tonight, this evening, when you go home, open the fridge and look at how many food there is in your fridge that is expired or close to expire. Or because we eat too many calories, and also that is food waste. Finally, I want to make sure that we are all aware about something which is very alarming. Already today, with our current lifestyle and behaviors, we are consuming the natural resources of 1.5 planet. 1.5 planet. If we continue at this pace, when we have to feed 9 billion people in 2050, even more than 9 billion people, we would need the resources of 3 planets. And obviously this is neither possible nor sustainable. Well, with all this in mind, there is something which is very alarming. All these emergencies are not topical, are not a priority of the political leaders of this world. In fact, if you look at the agendas of the political summit, you know, the G8, the G20, the G40, you will never find food and nutrition as a topic of their discussion. Obviously, they talk about economy, they talk about finance, how to grow the competitiveness, how to stop the migration, how to fight the terrorism, and much more. All these are very important issues, no doubt, but it is not reasonable that food and nutrition and the great paradoxes are not a priority as well, because the solution of these paradoxes are a prerequisite of the solution of all the other top priorities. Instead, unfortunately, we are, since ever, witnessing something that is unbelievable. These issues are simply outsourced by our political leaders, together with their accountabilities, and in that way, okay, the political leaders can offload the issue. Instead of tackling and discussing these issues personally, the issues have been delegated and are delegated to reputed, wonderful, large international organizations. Through the payment of a yearly contribution or a tax, the states have put the management and the solution of these emergencies in the hands of a wonderful organization, and I say that with all the due respect, such as the United Nations in New York, FAO, the World Food Programme, IFAD in Rome, and many others. Unfortunately, the extremely alarming data and facts that we see every day tell us that this is not the right way to manage the issue and the problem, because the issues, instead of getting fixed, are becoming even more important and dramatic. I think that we have to ask ourselves, which are the reason for the despair of people today, for the great migration, for the wars, and more for violent conflicts. I think that we have to ask ourselves which are the reason for the warming of our planet. Hence, our proposal, the proposal of the Barilla Foundation, is to put an end as soon as possible to this story, and to make sure that the paradoxes go back to the agenda of the political leaders. I would say not only to the political leaders, but the society, the entire society. And this proposal, in the coming month, will be fostered by an exceptional and unique event in the history. For the first time, the Universal Exposition, which, by the way, this year will take place in Milan from May to October, will focus precisely on the subject of food. The title chosen for the event is indeed Feeding the Planet, Energy for Life, and clearly and powerfully puts the topic of food in the center of the agenda. Imagine 146 countries from all over the world, will be participating to the Universal Expo. The political leaders of these countries will spend at least one day of their time visiting the Expo and talking about food and nutrition. More than 20 million people will visit the site, but even more important, for 6 months, all the world will be talking about food and nutrition. In short, the coming months are a unique opportunity to talk, discuss, and propose a path and solution to the above-mentioned paradoxes. Let's make sure that the Universal Expo is not only a great business event, at the end of which nothing remains. Let's make sure that there is a legacy, that the Expo produces the seed, since we are talking about food, and commitment to stop as soon as possible malnutrition, obesity, food waste, and much more. That's the reason why the Barilla Foundation proposed a protocol, the so-called Milan Protocol, which, in addition to recalling the dilemmas, also indicates precise guidelines and objectives to be achieved in the years to come, so that the eradication of hunger does not only remain a goal in principle, but it is actually pursued, so that the figures on overweight and obesity will be reduced in the years to come big times, so that sustainable agriculture will be really promoted, and speculators on food on the stock exchange will be banned, so that food is produced for human consumption and not for feeding cars, so that finally food waste will be reduced dramatically in the years to come. The protocol has been written with the help of some of the best leading international experts, has been shared with thousands of ordinary people and opinion makers. Dozens of public and private NGOs have already shared the content and even signed the protocol. And even more important, recently, to our great satisfaction, the Italian Prime Minister Matteo Renzi publicly praised the work we have done. As a consequence, the Italian government, which by the way will be hosting the Universal Exposition, announced that on that occasion a policy document will be presented, the Milan Charter. Starting from the Milan Protocol, the Milan Charter will deal the same issues and will aim to get the support of the largest possible number of states, companies, NGOs, and ordinary citizens like you. The Italian government intention is for the Milan Charter to be a policy-making document, open to all, because each of us, in his or her capacity, can make and can play a huge contribution. Let me conclude by telling you which are the key steps for the months to come. According to the Italian government, the following are the main steps for drafting, sharing, and getting the Milan Charter adopted by head of states and governments. From now on until March, the Milan Charter will be drafted. In March 2015, the Milan Charter will be presented to the 146 countries attending the Universal Expo. On June the 4th, the Italian government will host within Expo a political summit attended by the 146 political leaders with the intention of getting the charter signed by them. And finally, on October 16, which is the World Food Day, the Milan Charter will be handed over to Mr. Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the United Nations. Let me conclude by saying that our hope, my hope, Chairman, is that all of you in this room endorse and share the proposal of having, call it a Milan Protocol or a Milan Charter, and that we join forces to ensure that what seemed like a dream until yesterday can become a reality in the interest of every individual, but especially of the new generation today and tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luca, and welcome everyone. I hope you enjoyed lunch. It's our job to fight the dropping blood sugar levels that usually happen after lunch, which is why they picked the most exciting panel of the entire summit to come on after this. So no pressure, guys. All right. My name is Joe DeCapua. I'm with the Voice of America, managing editor of the Africa News Tonight program. And it's amazing how much food is a story that we cover, whether it's sustainable agriculture, food waste, and all too often these days, food insecurity as a result of a lot of crises and people being displaced. So no matter what the topic, it seems that food plays a major role. In this particular topic, we're going to talk about the Milan Charter and pushing for international agreements. And I've asked the panelists to feel free to speak out, make it more like a good conversation, maybe a noisy dinner, you know, that you have where people are speaking up, and don't feel that you have to just sit there and wait for your turn. But we will start out. I'll introduce each one. And after that, I'd like each person to maybe take 2 or 3 minutes to comment on either Luca's speech or something important to this topic, and then we can open up and get it going. I'd like to have at least maybe 15 minutes for questions. We'll see how that goes, so we'll try to stay on time and let you have your say. So, welcome to the panel and welcome everyone. To my immediate left, we have Richard McCarthy. He's the Executive Director of Slow Food USA. And I find what's really interesting is about his work following Hurricane Katrina. He went back to the region to help boost the local agricultural economy and start maybe giving people a sense of being back home, a sense of normalcy by reviving the local farmers markets there. We have Jonathan Bloom. He's a journalist, consultant. He's the author of the book American Wasteland and created the blog Wasted Food. And it's really shocking when you'll hear just how much food in this country and around the world is just wasted. It's phenomenal. Ellen Gustafson is the author of We the Eaters. If we change dinner, we can change the world. She's a social entrepreneur and activist. She co-founded Feed Projects and also the nonprofits, the Feed Foundation, Food Tank, Health Class 2.0. So we'll be looking at her expertise, and she's told us that the men cannot interrupt the women when they are speaking. Right. Okay. She's made that clear right in the green room. Okay. Laurie Benson is co-founder of 1% for Women. She spent many years promoting the work of Zimbabwean biologist Alan Savory, but she's now on her own and talking very much about empowering women in agriculture. In Africa, for example, most of the farmers are women, so it's a very important topic, and she promotes businesses also that commit 1% of their net profit to microcredit loans for women in agriculture. And microcredit loans may not sound like much, but it's amazing the businesses that can be founded with them. Then we have Kedar Mankad of the One Organization. Thank you for joining us. With your previous person could not attend, so we appreciate that. And you're going to look at also sustainable development goals. He's been looking at that, as well as agriculture, nutrition, and food security. And of course, you know Luca, so thank you all. So with that, start off with, if you would, 2-3 minutes, or if you will, on either Luca's speech or important to this particular topic.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Well, I am grateful as the Executive Director for Slow Food USA to start off this session with an Italian accent, because I think that we're fortunate that in Italy a conversation began 25 years ago with the robust proliferation of fast food that a community of sort of cultural preservationists, activists, had the audacity to actually challenge the idea that food is only fuel, but that actually food is so much more than fuel. I mean, we see this as it continues to rise in public consciousness, and it doesn't go away because every conversation, whether it's public health, economic development, rural degradation, always comes back to food, because food is so much more than fuel. I mean, I know that in the US we have this sort of horrible Protestant self-loathing idea that we mustn't enjoy ourselves. The Italians have a different perspective, and one that I admire is the idea of food being bioregion, being expression of your bioregion, of biodiversity, of culture, of community, of history, and that delicate balance between tradition and innovation, between joy and justice. And there's so much joy that I see in the food movement about growing an alternative, but there is also so much tension because of the injustice in this monolithic food system, this food economy, this way of life of only looking at food as fuel or as instant gratification, as opposed to much more long-term investment in ourselves and in our communities. And I think what's so fascinating and inspiring about the Milan Protocol is that it is a place not only for, as we know we will see for international gatherings, governments will be there, international non-governmental organizations will be there, we know business will be there, but so will civil society. And that this is an opportunity for civil society to really get a foothold in discourse, so it's not just civil society speaking with civil society, but that we actually begin to question the very assumptions that are in all of the international agreements, the very assumptions that are at the core of our economic model, which is that growth is always good, that scale is always admirable, and we need to actually rejigger what are our definitions of what success is, what health is, and that our ultimate goal is to create balance in community. And so that is the promise of this very ambitious Milano Protocol, and we hope that it will not yield the result of other protocols and other agreements that we know are the stranglehold of government and the purveyors of scale and monolith.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Jonathan.
Yeah, well said, Richard. And maybe when you're talking about civil societies, maybe we need to be a little less civil and do a little more hell-raising. But anyway, it's an honor to be here, that aside. And usually I enjoy speaking before lunch where my words or our words might possibly influence behavior a touch. But since we were after lunch, I had my minions take some pictures, and they're going to be posting those with the hashtag, "There's nothing sustainable about wasting food." So look for that on Twitter and Facebook. I'm just kidding.
Is that to put us at ease?
Yeah. Do you feel relaxed? Well, what's done is done, Richard. No, I'm totally kidding. I don't have minions, and that's a terrible hashtag.
He does have pictures, though.
I do have a few. I got interested in food waste 10 years ago in this very city, down the street at DC Central Kitchen. So it's incredibly encouraging to see all this action on food waste, to see the Milan Protocol pushing for a 50% reduction by 2020. And that kind of ambitious goal is just so fabulous, and to me is cause for optimism. And I think we in the United States need to look abroad, unfortunately, for inspiration, because there's so much more action happening there in the EU, in private companies like Barilla, and also in member states individually. But the change on food waste is coming. I think, as we heard yesterday in the panel, there's a tremendous amount of action, and really it's just a question of where we see the change happening and whether or not we can hone and focus and accelerate that change. When you think about growing food or cooking food and not using it, that idea is so nonsensical, it's just silly. And unfortunately, that's the norm in this country, where 40% of our food isn't used. So getting away from that, reducing the amount of food that we are wasting is not a radical idea by any stretch of the imagination. Quite the opposite, it's a reactionary idea, or possibly a conservative one, going back to doing things the way we used to. And so, as I mentioned before, things are going to change. They are changing at present, but what I would hope that we in this room can do is try to be change agents and push for a faster change. And we really need to accelerate those actions, because we can't keep cutting down the rainforest. We can't just keep producing more and more and more to try to solve hunger. We need to be smarter about how we produce food and then try to redistribute the amount we have. And to put it in fairly simple terms, we have enough food, 4 times as much as we need, to feed everyone on this planet. And it's just a matter of figuring out the details from here on out.
Thank you. Ellen?
Thank you, yeah. Well, this is a great panel. I'm really honored to be with everyone. You know, one thing I always like to bring to these discussions is sort of the hopeful note that comes out of watching the major consumer movements that have taken place across the food system. In my recent book, I talked a lot about the fact that, you know, we as consumers do have power. We, the eaters, do have power. We know that that's not enough. We know that we need international agreements. We need laws. We need regulatory frameworks. We need people to obey the laws and you know, really great sort of promotion of some of these much bigger ideas that obviously as consumers we can't do alone. But one thing I think is really important to always bring up in these forums is that consumers have really changed. If we think about this conversation 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we might not have had an easy time getting donations of really great quality food from companies like Chipotle or Sweet Green. We might not have had, you know, the fair trade coffee that was as available as it is to have at a forum like this. We might not all be in this room talking about how we shop at the farmers markets and how we're members of CSAs. And that isn't just happening on the coasts. That is happening everywhere across this country. There are people that are becoming awakened to the fact that if they eat better, they feel better. And if the food that makes them feel better is probably also food that makes the planet feel better and makes the environment feel better and makes workers better. So I think there is incredible, there's a moment to be hopeful, because consumers have really done some great groundwork laying the foundation to prove that if we do have ways to get people better quality food, if we can tell the stories of better quality food, if we can give people better options of where to buy their food, if we can make international agreements that actually promote the real values of food that we want, a lot of people will buy it. And I think that is something that we don't want to forget. We don't want to, only leave feeling like there's so much work to be done, but let's also remember that a lot of work has been done, and a lot of eaters that are in this room, that are watching this whole day, but also that are just going about their lives, have tried to make better choices. And as long as we keep showing people that these better choices are available, help the businesses that are providing these better choices, and continue down the path of making sure that there are laws to only have those better choices, I really do think we, the eaters, will change our food system.
Thank you.
Woo.
Laurie, follow that.
Thank you. So the panel before us shared a lot of amazing statistics and facts about women in agriculture. And I actually want Jahi and maybe Hat to be my new best friends. I love the work you're doing. What Luca was saying with the Milan Protocol, the arm of the Milan Protocol that deals with sustainable agriculture, we cannot sustain anything if we continue to ignore half of our agriculturalists in the world. Women are so important to creating change and creating a different food system, putting an end to violence, putting an end to poverty, putting an end to the oppression that we're seeing. The resources available to women are so limited that they don't have an opportunity. They don't have a chance. Policy is incredibly important, but at this point, the laws exist, they're just not upheld. We are up against cultural norms that are keeping things from women, keeping things from their children, keeping things from changing. I am incredibly passionate and have committed myself to creating that ripple that will give women the voice in the agricultural system specifically that they deserve. Like I said, policy is important, but how do we break through the cultural norms? It's not actually illegal in most parts of the country, most parts of the world, for women to own land. It's a cultural barrier that they cannot break through. They're not able to own this land. They don't have access to these resources that their husbands and brothers and fathers do. So I have tried to figure out a way that businesses here in the US, that individuals can get involved in being a part of that change. I think microcredit is an incredible way to, an incredible opportunity and a mechanism and a tool to empower these women. When women are given the same resources as men, things change, things grow. When women have land to tend and are responsible for that land, they look at planting things that are going to give their family, offer their family nutrition. They then grow enough to offer that nutrition to their community, and to their greater community. It ripples out and it grows. So I'm here to share the voice of women. I would love to figure out how we break through those cultural norms. I think it's a huge task, and I think it's an important one that we all need to start looking at if we're going to talk about sustainable anything.
Thank you. Kedar?
Thanks, Laurie. Thank you, Joe. Thanks, Luca, for an amazing keynote. Thanks, Danielle and Food Tank, for putting together an amazing event. I'm honored to be here. And my journey really started in a dusty village in the Middle Atlas Mountains of Morocco, where I was working with small farmers in the Peace Corps, actually. So I'm here today representing the One campaign, but the real reason I'm here are those farmers that I was working with. The One campaign it's a grassroots advocacy organization co-founded by Bono, just to give you a little background. And we really, I think, agree with you, Luca, that international agreements, and not just ones that are going to be upheld by the United Nations, FAO, some of these major institutions, are really the bedrock that we can use to leverage to leverage policymakers and decision makers to move forward on the agenda. They are the standard by which one, as an organization that has millions of members throughout the world, can hold the decision makers to account. And so really these agreements are key or critical. They're not the only tool, but they're a major tool that we have to use to make sure that action is taken on agriculture and food security. And I think 2015 is a really critical year for this, especially with the Millennium Development Goals ending. The Sustainable Development Goals are being finalized as we speak. I'm certainly worried that agriculture, food security, and nutrition are going to fall off the agenda. So just to put into perspective, less than 1% of official development assistance in 2013, that is resources and money going from donor countries to countries in need, was dedicated to nutrition, less than 1%. Less than 7% was dedicated to agriculture and food security. So if we're looking at a $340 billion that's being sent over every single year, 1% is not enough, 7% is not enough. This is too small of a slice of the pie when we know that 805 million people are hungry every year. We know that 50% of all child deaths can be attributed to malnutrition. And we know that 45% of all countries are actually now faced with the double burden of both obesity and malnutrition. So they're fighting this battle on both fronts. So 1% is clearly not going to cut it when it comes to international action. So one is really dedicating 2015 to the Sustainable Development Goals. We want to make sure that they are good enough, as in agriculture and food security are high on the agenda. We want to make sure that they are famous enough so that people know about them from anywhere from Topeka to Togo, that they're understandable, that they're well financed. Member states are going to be coming together on a major meeting in the next few months to discuss the financing framework for these goals. And we also want to make sure that the resources are followed by results. So I think this goes back to one of your points, Luca. It's not just commitment, it's accountability. It's following through on pledges. And so it's up to us, the advocacy community, to really ensure that we hold everyone's feet to the fire, that we make sure that commitments are actually followed through, that we track progress, that we make sure things are done in a transparent manner. And so that's really what my focus and what One's focus are going to be this year. So looking forward to discussing all of that.
Thank you. You had your chance.
I had the chance. No, thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. And no, a couple of points only. I want to make sure that, first of all, the call to action that I share with you today is we really feel that there is a sense of there is urgency, to address these issues. And we don't think that having a protocol will fix all the problems in one night. We are not so stupid. We are not so dreamers. But it is like, you may remember that it was 20 years ago. Okay, I think it was 20 years ago that we had first the Rio summit and then the Kyoto Protocol on the environment. Everybody, the environment was becoming a problem, but the environment was not in the agenda of the political leaders. From that moment on, it becomes a key topic. We saw many, many failures about environmental policy, but at that moment, people started to realize that the environment was part of our daily life, and also political leaders did also some progress. Recently, you may remember that your president, Barack Obama, signed an important agreement with the Chinese president on reducing CO2 emission. I think that some part of the merit was also thanks to the Kyoto, efforts or the people that had the vision to have. Okay, so my point is, if we don't start sometimes and somewhere having a simple but demanding international agreement, we will find each other in 10, 20 years' time still talking about the issue, but with no progress. So that's the reason why we are preaching to have an international protocol. And so that is why we are preaching that also US, that is facing exactly the same problem that I was talking before, will be an active part of that protocol, okay? Chairman, Joe, let me make a final comment because Ellen said something which is absolutely true. And by the way, see, this is not only a public responsibility, it's a private public responsibility, it's an everybody responsibility. In fact, Ellen said that the change of the system starts with us as people, as consumers, because every day we start, we decide our life and we decide the life of this planet. So depending on our choices, okay, how we want to feed ourselves, how much or how we want to feed ourselves, that determines a huge impact on our planet, okay? So before I made an example about food waste, open the fridge tonight and check, there is no need to buy too much or to eat too much. In fact, it could be crazy because at the end I represent also a producer, a company, but the mantra and the call of my chairman, Guido Barilla, is always the following: eat less, eat better. So we need having people eating less food and more quality food. So guys, so check when you go on the shelf, the quality, try to check, understand what's the quality of the food that you buy and eat less food. So it's simple as that. If you do that, you reward a positive system and you will benefit because, God blessing, you will be living longer and better, but also the planet will benefit. And probably the positive operator will be rewarded. So the change starts with each of us. But then we need also, the active involvement of the political leaders. So that's my point.
You had mentioned climate change, and we see some action being taken now as glaciers melt and as we have droughts and wildfires, and people are starting to go, maybe it's true. But it took a long, long time. So what's the food equivalent of melting glaciers that would get people excited about this issue? Anyone?
Well, I always think that, the first place that people get hit by any of these things is in their jean size. And literally, and that there's so many people across this country who have gotten active in food, whether it's because they adopt a certain diet or they start going on a blog or learn something or realize there's a farmer's market or realize there's an organic section in their grocery store. A lot of those changes start because people feel it in their waistlines and they're realizing that they don't want to be unhealthy, overweight, have diet-related diseases. And I do think that's a huge opportunity that we need to seize on. It's a little bit easier to get people there than it even is to get people to change their light bulbs, because it's actually going to, we know that if we get people to eat less, better quality, healthier foods, better for the environment foods, we do know that in general that means that we lose weight. And that's a great starting point for a lot of consumers. It shouldn't be the only place that people join us, but it is a great starting point.
I think this year is super important to being the International Year of Soils. I think there's an incredible opportunity for us to look at climate change and agriculture and healing the land and the importance of our actions, what we eat, again, how it's tended and how it's cared for. If we also take that stance a step further and say, how is the food that we're consuming, is it healing the land that it's where it's grown? Is it, depleting our soil, which much of it is? I think this year, 2015, is a huge opportunity for all of us to really ask those questions and start the conversation in a really important way.
Yeah, and in terms of a harbinger of ill times ahead, akin to the icebergs and the polar ice caps melting, I mean, what if there weren't bananas at the store? Or what if certain food items started disappearing? Certain food items, chocolate, I mean, there would be riots. I know Ellen would be leading the charge. But yeah, what if certain foods that we've come to rely upon, which aren't produced locally, go away? And I think people would really start to notice then.
There is, in fact, a fungus that's affecting the world's major banana strains right now, and it's estimated, I think, it's like something around $50 million to combat that. And that's part of also maintaining plant and genetic diversity. So making sure that we are not just eating one thing, we are eating varieties of many things. So,
Richard, you had something?
I love hearing so much attention given to biodiversity. It is often a very obtuse subject that we can't get our arms around, unless it is, am I going to get my chocolate and my bananas? It often can be daunting, because when we look at our biodiversity, it's staggering how much we are losing. And we're losing it in part because we've given up on rural communities. We've given up on the belief that these are assets that we need to preserve, and the crafts and skills associated with it. What we have found in our movement is we've created sort of the Noah's Ark of endangered foods, which is the Ark of Taste. And they matter not just because they're endangered foods, but because they're endangered foods that are part of our taste heritage. And what I think is also, I mean, certainly the environmental movement has gone through so many interesting iterations, much of which are very depressing, because we do see that we're making forward movement, but isn't enough, is we need to find ways to trigger some proactive activities that we can do to begin to make these large cultural shifts. And one of these is identifying what are the endangered foods in our communities that matter from a biological reason and also for a cultural reason. What are these cultural elements of these cultural heritages that we are losing, and are we willing just to give them away? Because if we can begin to rally around them, we can begin to treasure them as assets, both culturally as well as economically and biologically.
Kedar mentioned, and a number of you mentioned, holding the policymakers' feet to the fire. Very often when I do interviews with the various NGOs on these topics, they always bring up political will. Year after year after year, it's political will. So how do you do that? How do you do, if you don't have huge amounts of money to lobby, you know, what kind of influence can you have, or can they have, on the policymakers actually going along with the Milan Charter, for example?
Okay. I don't know. First of all, I'm very confident, and I'm very optimistic because really recently the step in of the Italian government on this issue, okay, make me believe that something will be achieved. And I'm not saying that because I'm Italian and I want to praise the Italian government, not at all. Who knows me, I was always saying that we were seeking for whatever government in the world to take the lead on the Milan Protocol, being, you know, from Africa or Japan. And then finally it happened that the Italian government said, okay, so I'm very positive because I'm sure that they will push big times, they have a strong path, and they will get some results. My call here is guys, don't leave them alone, because the more now, and when I say the more now, we, the civil society, push the Italian government and all the others, and in this case the US administration, for example, you know, to join forces, to have you know, a charter or a protocol, a policy document that manages or addresses this issue, the more chances of success we will be having. So don't leave them alone, because otherwise my positive you know, vision become negative. So I think that we have to be the first to give the example, and that's the reason why, before I said that already, the Milan Protocol has been signed by the way, Slow Food here, you know, my friend represents Slow Food, his boss Carlin Petrini, the visionary guy, already signed the Milan Protocol, and many other organizations like WWF, but thousands of ordinary people. We have to keep that path, so that if they feel the pressure, they understand that we, people, are serious about that. You see? So that is the reason why I'm positive.
So in October, the protocol is going to be presented to UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon.
Yeah.
So what is the likelihood or the chances of that protocol being absorbed into the whole UN system and becoming a new convention or something like that? Would that be better? Would that be worse?
You know, it's interesting, the panel before lunch talked about meeting the people where they were. And instead of expecting people to come to farmers markets, they were talking about bringing the food to these people where they were. I think that is very relative to what we're talking about right now. You know, these policies and these protocols and everything are crucial and so important, but that does not trickle down to these people often who are on the land having the issues, dealing with the oppression and the poverty. So while policy plays such a crucial part, so does education and awareness. And that's, I've really enjoyed the past 2 days because everybody's talking about little pieces of the pie. And I think those little pieces of the pie are so important. When you put them all together, really what we're all doing here though is a communication campaign. We are all spreading the word, we're creating ripples, we're making change by having the conversations. That education and awareness has to reach the individuals who would never, they don't even know who's running their country. They don't know. You know, these aren't the facts that are important to a significant part of the world. So I think the policy is here, and then I think here is the education and awareness and actually getting, making a change, giving people on the ground the chance to create change by saying, I don't think this is right, and feeling empowered to do that is equally important.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, by definition, in a representative democracy, we can let our elected officials know how we feel. In reality, it doesn't quite work that way, not in most cases, but we are all eaters, and we have tremendous power there, and unifying as a nation of eaters, as a globe of eaters, to communicate to the food companies what kinds of change we want. That has been very effective in the last 10, 15 years, and change happens quite rapidly in this century with social media being what it is. So just think about the advent of organic food, how quickly that spread, regardless of your opinion on whether that's the ultimate good or not. Think about things like recycling, how ubiquitous that is today, whereas 15 years ago, no one really knew how exactly to go about doing that. Today, 60%, more than 60% of Americans can recycle at their curbside. So I think things do happen quite rapidly these days, so that has me encouraged.
Well, and I think what's also really important, and we all touched on this, but in so many, you know, in the Millennium Development Goals, for example, that I know the one campaign worked on, a lot of us in this room, you know, have thought about and talked about and wanted to focus on ending hunger. There was a necessary disconnect between what people in the developing world needed and what maybe we in the West felt like we needed. And we have, I think Food Tank has done an incredible job. Danielle has been a leader in this. We have now finally come to the realization we all need change, and it's actually incredibly similar. Things that are needed to ensure good nutrition in the developing world are things that are needed to ensure good nutrition down the street from here. And so I think that there's an opportunity to really align a lot of the big picture political goals. The sustainable development goals are right in that vein, and so is the Milan Protocol. It's things that are needed both in the West for the wealthy world, but are also totally needed for the developing world. And now that we're more aligned in seeing that our challenges are in some ways more similar, I think we have a huge opportunity to make sure that the solutions actually happen and happen in a really comprehensive way.
Well, can international agreements have an effect on what's now happening in the developing world with the emerging economies? They're adopting our diet here in the West, and we see a rise in cardiovascular disease, cancer, diabetes. It's all on the rise, and they're talking about how livestock production is going to increase dramatically, and more factory farms, and that's going to contribute to climate change, and on and on and on. So what you said is very important, but now how do you reverse that trend? Can something like the protocol or any international agreement start reversing that, start getting into that? And then after this, we'll go to Q&As. from the audience.
Well, really quick, one thing I'll say is in many ways, Americans are starting to reverse that trend. I mean, our meat consumption, as was mentioned earlier, has in some ways leveled off. And so although that's not the hope, that's not the great big hope for the rest of the world, but the fact is that if American consumers are changing, and if we create better systems here that work better to feed this Western consumer, I do think that is helpful in proving that these better systems can exist and that they probably should be what exist in the rest of the world.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would say we have many tools at our disposal, international agreements being one of them, but policy change as another major option. And one of the things I've been excited about with food waste in particular is the state landfill bans on food waste. Just this simple act of making it illegal to throw away food, as a lot of the New England states have done, and the city of Seattle is actually pursuing. That has dramatic effects on how we approach food at all steps of the food chain, all levels of the food ladder. And I believe that will have a ripple effect. So it's policy, it's international agreements, it's pressuring food companies through activism, but also your dollar spending, and then finally having agency in your own lives, just changing how you approach food because you're a good person and you've heard all the messages from the last couple days, and we're going to put those messages to use and spread them to our communities.
And what,
if I can just add one little bit, and it's also challenging the very premise of the tyranny of cheap food. I mean, that social contract is what keeps rural communities being robbed of their wealth, being told, especially in the US, that you're no longer relevant because we'd much rather outsource it to the global South in order to produce GMO soy, in order to feed more farm animals, in order to grow the sort of the neo-colonial, cultural colonial value of eating more meat as an indicator of great wealth. So that vestige is something that we need to begin to challenge, is that very issue of cheap food is cheap. Truth of the matter is the planet cannot afford it. We need to begin, and I think the next session on true cost accounting only illustrates the need that we need to be able to pull away the veneer that hides the fact that all of our systems are subsidized. And the cheap food is actually very expensive on our health, on the state of our communities, and our connectedness between global north and global south, between urban and rural, between the issue of access to land and wealth, between women and men, and the role of labor. So I think that very premise of cheap food is something we need to really tackle.
I'm going to have to cut you off because I do want to get the audience in here. So we're going to turn the audience loose. If you have a question, I believe someone's going to come around with a microphone. Feel free to identify yourself, ask the question, and we may have some questions as well. We have one right in front here. Some questions as well from the viewers. A lot of people are watching this on their computers and other electronic devices. Yeah, right in front here.
Hi, my name's Patrick. I'm a member of Restaurant Opportunity Center as well as Common Threads, which teaches 3rd, 5th graders in lower income neighborhoods how to cook. I'm a chef instructor. And my question revolves around the consumerist culture, especially in Western societies like the United States. Very often we are bombarded with messages and also are preoccupied with the mentality that I want what I want when I want it. And it goes back to the examples before about what kind of catalyst event like climate change and drought is going to cause the same thing for food systems. And you mentioned if you can't have your chocolate, you're going to go nuts. My problem with that is I think people actually need to get used to the fact that they don't necessarily have everything that they want at any time in the grocery store. Part of the whole local food movement is exactly that. It's to actually grow what you can in your local bioregion. It's not necessarily to have the lemons and the limes or the tomatoes when they're not necessarily in season in your region. And I think, and call me a pessimist, Americans are a bit not prepared for that kind of change in attitude or perspective. And so my question is in regards to the Milan Protocol, do you think that that has any potential to try and change that consumer's mindset, especially here in the United States?
Luca, go ahead. Now
yeah, that's a very difficult question, frankly speaking. Frankly speaking, I don't know. I don't have the answer for you. I would say that, you know, I think that if we want to change the attitude of the people, everything starts with information and education, or much is very much related to information and education. If you don't inform people, if you don't educate people, especially children, you don't change the system. And again, I want to go back to the Milan Protocol and to the thousands of meetings about food and nutrition that we have around the world, because I want to be sure that I explain myself properly. So it's not that today there are no meetings on food and nutrition. The problem is that there are too many meetings and there is no publicity at all about these meetings. So with all the due respects, every day there is a meetings in Europe or in everywhere about you know, the level of nutrition, the labeling, the package, the standards. The problem is that these are technical meetings which are not accessible to the people. I mean accessible, I mean that people, they don't know anything about the issue and the proposed solution. So one good thing about, in my opinion, adopting a Milan Protocol or a protocol is that the moment when you have you know, the leaders discussing at least once a year or twice a year the big issues, obviously, you know, there will be a lot of information around these issues. And people will start to understand that, for example, you know, you cannot have whatever you want every time, everywhere, you know, because it's part of the problem, it's part of the solution, you see? So, but till the moment that we keep this matter down into, okay, at level -2, -3, -4, people won't know everything. We have to raise the level of discussion, the level of information, and the level of education. Then I think that people will start to become conscious about which are the problems and which are the solutions and what's the behaviors that each of us has to take every day. So that's the reason why I don't have a specific answer to your question, but I think that that is the approach, the right approach. So, and if you don't mind, Joe, so that, because that is part of, it's not that handing over the protocol to Ban Ki-moon means that, you know, there is a paradox that we fail because you give back the toy, sorry for that expression, to, you know, the Secretary General of the United Nations, and then we go back to the system. Not at all. We think that we need both, because the work that today is done by such organization is wonderful. Is wonderful. We are not saying that it's not wonderful. There are wonderful people, there is wonderful competence, but it's not enough. That is the issue. Because if you delegate everything to this organization, okay, you don't fix the issue. So you have to advocate back the issue, okay, to the agenda. And so the two together probably will move the things. So that's...
Very good, thank you. Laurie, I think this one's for you. This was sent to us by Audra. What are some of the things we can do to help create equality and awareness for women in agriculture worldwide?
Of course, I can't talk because I'm coughing. Say, what are some of the things that we can do?
Yeah, to raise awareness.
You know, I think educating ourselves. Social media is, of course, an incredible tool. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm going to try and get through this. You know, education starts with us. And again, I know I keep talking about rippling out, but it ripples out from there. A quick story. I have an 11-year-old daughter who is around these conversations all the time. And so her way of engaging was turning our land into a mini hobby farm and helping others learn from there. When she was 8, she saw a documentary called The Dark Side of Chocolate and started a little campaign to end child slave labor in the chocolate industry. I think that's how we create change. We start with ourselves and communicate from there. I'm trying to do that. We're working on doing that on a global level through the microcredit, empowering women, giving women a voice. It's really important that we all know everybody around the world that there's support, that the education reaches people. So I think the biggest thing is educating ourselves and those around us, and it can have a significant, incredible impact.
Anybody in the audience? Can we get a mic over here?
Yeah, thank you.
Joe, do you mind if I just add to that really quick?
Oh, sure, go ahead while they're doing this. Go ahead.
I think it's really important to note that 2015 is a year of women's empowerment at the African Union level. So it's a really great opportunity to mobilize around women and girls, especially knowing the facts. 43% of the agricultural labor force are women. Women represent the primary caretakers for most of households. When you empower and educate women and give them health, I think it's like I think I read statistics like responsible for something like 55% of the reduction in hunger in the past 15 years. So these are important facts, and so there's an opportunity there. March 8th is, I think, International Women's Day. There are lots of ways to organize around issues with women and food, globally, both globally and sort of regionally.
Even beyond that, the statistics that you just shared, 80% of the food produced on the African continent is touched by women, is impacted by women. I mean, it's a huge, significant opportunity for us to make great change. That starts here. And yes, the Year of Women Empowerment is incredibly important. I'd love to see that go well beyond a year. I think we can all do that. But yeah, this is all pieces of the puzzle. But the opportunity to create incredible change and to do it quickly lies in women. So spreading that word and sharing those stories and leading with where we want to go, sharing the positive stories, the stories of hope, the stories of change, and helping each other understand what's really happening out there is critical.
All right, we have about 7 minutes left, so if you have a question, we'll try to make it quick.
Hi, so my name is Leah Kurtz, and I'm with NYU, their Food Studies program. And my question is also for Laurie and Kedar as well. Beyond offering loans to female farmers, have you found effective methods to change the cultural gender imbalances that you've been talking about, and specifically to lessen women's time poverty, where they're not only responsible as breadwinners, but then also as, cooking and cleaning and raising children, and then 2, to reduce women's susceptibility of their access to credits and loans being exploited by male relatives, which I read is a current issue in microfinance for women. So can you give any examples of the ways that you actually deal with that in those communities?
First of all, I wish I could figure out how to stop cleaning the house and doing my work as well. That's not, I haven't figured out that answer yet. I think absolutely microcredit is not the end-all be-all answer. It's one tool to help these women to fund what they're doing, to help them gain status in their families and communities. And I think that ultimately is the way to create that change. It's helping elevate the status for these women. There are amazing success stories everywhere about women who begin to bring home an income. They're valued. They first are valued by their husbands, who didn't actually understand that they were able to do that. So they're valued by their husbands. This then spreads into their communities. Women, they lift up women within their community when they see what they can do. They form co-ops. They gather together and make each other stronger. I think that's the education that's very significant. It starts with one woman and helping her understand how she can create change. Now, by also empowering these women and giving them, helping provide a tool for them to be successful, an ultimate goal of that is keeping their daughters in school. If the daughters aren't pulled out of their education and asked to help in the various domestic jobs that you were discussing, then we're starting to break that cycle. We're breaking that cycle of oppression. We're breaking that cycle of poverty. Education is just a critical and important part of everything that I do day to day. And I think that by allowing the microcredit funds, another thing that we're doing, so our businesses that get involved provide the microcredit loans. The organization, we put our 1% toward the training. So not only are the women receiving the loans, but they're also receiving training so they can ultimately get away from those loans, and they have the tools themselves to continue to grow and prosper in their communities.
I think also, just to add on that, robust social protection programs are really the key to a lot of this. When we're talking about unpaid care, responding to health crises within the family, responding to harvest time when more labor is needed, social protections, so whether they're in the form of in-kind transfers, cash transfers, or otherwise, are really critical to making sure that there is a safety net, and it's not just the woman who is giving her unpaid care that is the safety net, but there is a legitimate structural change within the system. And I think one thing that we don't really talk about too much is energy poverty. So rural electrification and fuel-efficient cook stoves, so that women don't have to go and gather wood from faraway sources, or women don't have to be the ones who get the water, is another key sort of time and labor saving way of reducing this care and this care burden that is upon women.
All right, I don't think we really have time for another question. We have less than 3 minutes left, so let me begin by thanking you all and just going over again. Luca, thank you very much for telling us all about this, and good to meet you.
Yeah, thanks.
Right,
can I make a call, just a second? Can I make a call, a final call? Can I make a final? Yeah. No, what I mean is that, because we talk a lot.
As you can see, Italians like to talk.
Absolutely, all the time. No, but because we talk about a lot about the Milan Protocol, but probably you don't know which are the content of that proposal. So tonight or tomorrow, when you have time, go to milanprotocol.com and go through the content. And if you share the content, the proposal, sign it, okay? Sorry for that. So that's my call.
That's okay. With that, I want to thank Luca and Richard, Jonathan, Ellen, Laurie, and Kedar. Thank you very, very much for taking part in the panel, and thank you all for being here for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just thank Joe and Luca and all of our other panelists. It was a great discussion. I'm really happy you could all be here. We're going to take a very short 10-minute break. Please come back. We have 2 exciting panels left for the day and a keynote by Congresswoman Pingree, so please stick around.